Thanks for joining us today, G. This is our first, and thanks everyone else for joining us. This is our first episode and what we're calling our CMO series. And we worked with G over the past few weeks to launch a new blog post, which definitely has a catchy title that AI just cut the CMO's job in half. And then today we're gonna like piece through some of that. So looking at our guest who's joining us, it's not often you meet someone who goes by a single letter. And when you mention that single letter, everyone seems to know who he is. So just to give a bit of background, obviously we all know G or Guillaume Cabane, marketing growth leader, former like interim CMO at Ramp, VP of growth, segment drift, Gorgias. I know as I was getting my career started as a growth engineer, I used to read everything G posted on the segment blog. It was copied, it was modified, but it always held true and worked, which was great. That's what we want to try and show off today. And then more today, like G's a growth advisor across like B2B SaaS companies and beyond. But yeah, do you want to give anything else there, G, of like how you spend your days nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously just helps to be a veteran. All right, I've been doing this for so long that and I've been like consistent about staying in growth and in marketing for B2B. All right, where a lot of my peers have like eventually moved off to other things and other venues. Like I've stayed consistent at this for like let's say 15 years now. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of people who know of me, of my work, of the companies I worked at over the years. And at the core, and we can go into some of that. I want to think of myself as a technologist, right? I just love technology, all right? And whether that was like, Zapier 10 years ago and all the workflows we could do and the enrichments and the clibits, whether that was some of the, early prompting that we did and some of like advanced like things we did like a few years ago, whether there's what we're doing with like AI apps and like vibe coding now, like I just love this. I just love this. And it's a constant challenge for me as, new people join the fray. It's a challenge for me to stay at the peak always and always. That's my constant challenge. So I'm kind of like the veteran athlete here trying to like keep up with all of the 20-year-old something coming in. That's kind of my challenge.
I love it. You're the LeBron James of our time. It's hard to know when he'll ever retire, but he's
Uh,
still out there. He's still
that's
consistent.
that's
He's
hard to live up
building.
to. That's very
Yeah.
hard to live up to.
I think you do a good job. So,
Okay.
just getting into our agenda, what we're going to go through today, just conversation. We have some slides. I'm
Yeah.
going to like ask you some questions. Basically, the whole market is changing. The job of the CMO is like radically different to what it was 12 months, 36 months ago. So across yesterday versus today, the speed mismatch, how you might retool your team via like a stack or like org wise. There's a notion of G likes to coin them like AI proof channels. We're going to go through a series of these, kind of like hash out questions on each of them. And then as questions come up from anyone in the audience, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. Like definitely ask questions live, but we'll have a dedicated time at the end for live Q&A as well. So if you've had I've had many questions I've had to put in my back pocket for a long time for G. So I have some that I can resurface, but do please engage in the chat. And then, yeah, as we're going through it, pop your questions in. So to get us started, G, I have this, why we're here. Like CMOs feel the ground moving. There's so much, like you mentioned, being a technologist. Like we often see, or I see today we see like the return of like the builder, the person who's like the practitioner. They're getting back maybe from like 100% management to really like tweaking, building stuff, handing it off to their teams. That's probably driven by a change in user search patterns, like web experiences. Like two data points I have here. One is like 83% of teams are still without AI workflows in production. Sure, they might be
Mm.
using it for a piece, but maybe like end to end, it's still in the minority of teams that have pushed something that actually lifts them on a daily basis. And then we're all aware of the impact ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude has had. Like 45% of Google SERPs are now AI answers. So like previously a really good channel you would have trumped and many others did too, like organic. Now you're not just competing against your competitors in the SERP, you're competing with like videos, other multimodal formats. So everything has changed. Maybe give us a feel for like the signals in the market that tell you like the
Yeah.
ground is shifting for CMOs at the moment.
Sure. I mean, I can tell you how it works at the later stage companies where I've been involved, right? And like, just think about it this way, right? Anything that a CMO does, comes from like, market pressure and board pressure. And, we're thinking like, quarterly and yearly cycles. And so as you're thinking of like, hey, how is my next quarter, my next like yearly half or my next year, what are my priorities there? How should I invest? Because that's like one of my core jobs is like to allocate budget capital, right? And then those decisions will happen when that quarter starts, um, and they will have an impact at the end of that quarter. And so all of the actions are delayed by at least a quarter, two or more for my decisions, which means I need to anticipate that lag in my process. Okay, and the challenge here is that where will the market be 6 months from now? Who can tell me that? That's a very hard exercise. And so you're forced to make a prediction then as a CMO of like, where's the target? If you see that graph here, like it's a moving target. So you need to shoot at that target from 6 months from now. Okay, so that's my job. Okay, so predictions. Well, you look at the trend. It's obvious that there's less, traffic going to Google and less people reading web pages in totality, right? And people are using LLMs to like, circumvent that process. Okay, so it was, 5%, 10%. It's going to end up at like 20%, 30% at the end of the year or something like that, right? Where did it go? Okay, so I'm shooting for that target. In a shorter way, I'm shooting for a zero-click world of a web-less world. How far from now? Is it like 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? But I'm definitely shooting for that. Okay, so I'm now reallocating capital and headcount for a world where the way we thought about ads, about SEO, radically changes and the consumption of web content changes. That is what I think we should impress, is that we were going for a world where like we were trying to drive traffic to our website down that funnel. Like the whole concept of B2B marketing and to some extent B2C marketing over the past like 20 years is drive people to the top of a funnel and then they trickle down the funnel and they convert to like leads. That's the whole concept. I don't think that applies 6 months from now. And so that is the radical change. All right. If people don't click on my ads because they don't go to the Google, or if they don't, search for like, they don't see my SERPs on Google, whatnot, like my funnel is changing. The concept of funnel is changing entirely. So that's what I'm shifting for. So when you say ground is moving, like I'm not sure they all realize it, that what's going on.
Yeah, I love that take. And then one thing you recently brought up as well was around like new browsers. And I think I've seen you talk about like how maybe the e-commerce like user path is going to change, and then maybe like for B2B motions as well. Maybe just pick that apart for me a little
Yeah,
bit more when it comes
sure.
to like new browsers.
Yeah. So we're talking about at the beginning, I was in SF, so if you haven't played around with like the new browsers like Dia or Comet, all right, you should. I don't think it should be your workhouse browser, right now, but just play around and think about, what the experience means to you. So if you haven't tried like Dia is this new browser from the folks who did Arc, right? And the browser company, and so like if you Dia is a LLM in the browser in the sense that you can like interact with tabs in a chat box, and you can just like say you can add a tab or multiple tabs and say like like summarize those like 5 New York Times articles for me in a concise way, and very much the same way you could like copy paste the links in GPT, but here you don't need to do that. You don't need to copy paste. All right. Comet is from Perplexity and takes it like a stab further in a way, in the sense that it can uh, automate the behavior. It's like a headless browser. It can automate like an agent your actions on the browser. So potentially it could like book meetings for you. It could like purchase things for you, right? And so you can see you're going in that direction where you can see this like spectrum of like how how much are you, the human, interacting with the web content versus the LLM, right? If you are like opening tabs and say, oh, this is a big article, and just copy paste part of that article or the link in GPT, or I'm gonna go there in Dia and ask it to do it, or I'm going to ask, Comet to like build a page for me that summarizes everything. It's just a spectrum, right, of how much you're interacting with the content or not, right? And so it's clear we're moving to a world where we're interacting less and less. And I was giving you the example earlier. Let's imagine you have to, buy a piece of jewelry for your girlfriend, your wife, right? In the old world, you would go to like a number of Etsy pages and whatnot, and like you would like do some searches on Google, and you would like find like maybe through Google Shopping a couple of different options and whatnot. Like sure, and then you'd refine your selection, and you have like 100 tabs open, and you like after a number of hours of work, you find what you want. Okay, that's the process. That is the process. Okay, now what's stopping the future from being like you define your criteria in an LLM query, you have a carousel like Heaven GPT of the options. Now my question is, now that you see the carousel, do you actually need to go to the page, the different pages, to see the detail of the product and purchase? Why can the experience not be they say, hey, product B is what I want, order it for me? Kaboom, it orders it for you because it knows your payment details, it knows your address, and it's done. And so that doesn't seem so far-fetched. Like it's already fetching all the product details. It's like, how hard is it to go process an order on like a Shopify store, right? And so if that is the case, if that is the future, you have not gone to the Shopify website. You have not gone to the Etsy website. You have not seen the other options. You have not seen any of the cart, any of the funnel, any of the things that they've built and they painstakingly built, right? The chat experience, all of that. You just got a product in your LLM experience and you said that was the right one, and that is the end of your interaction.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that is the probable future.
Like what you're talking about is like a reinvention of the standard user journey, where like previously it was like maybe I go to Google, I open up a ton of tabs, as you said, I do my research. Now it's like the agent is the middleman. The agent is the person who's like doing all the work for you. And I think it speaks to what we went through on this slide of like CMOs feel the ground moving and for good reason. So like one thing I read a lot of what like Kieran Flanagan puts out, and obviously
Mhm.
watch the Marketing Against the Grain podcast about where he like really hashes out kind of like the practicalities of what people should be thinking on today. I think you
Mm.
brought up a very like clever point of a lot of even the best practitioners of maybe older eras who are now in like VP, CMO levels, they're going back to being builders. They're going back to be like practitioners. Um, like what are the skills or behaviors that separate maybe what we define here as like the slide deck CMO from the person who's getting back in and doing like the dirty work, the hands-on operator? Like what are the skills that maybe define those people today, or what's like the mentality shift that you've observed?
Yeah, I think um, we're using CMO as a placeholder here. I think it's true for like every management level, where interestingly, uh, we probably need as many managers as before, but we need less individual workers. It's just that the managers will manage AI agents workflows. Okay, that's what I need. So, like when you're thinking of like constructing your team, right? Well, content-wise, maybe I'm gonna have like 5 or 6 different agents to do my market research, my content prep, and all of that, right? And same for my CS, right? And same for my AEs, right? And so I'm still a team lead. I'm just leading a team of agents. Um, and so in that case, my skills as a manager no longer are of like, uh, people skills. They become a bit more technical workflow building and workflow management skills, right? And so closer and closer, you can see very quickly how you have to become a a builder and maintainer of workflows, just like you were like trying to attract talent in the past. All right. So that is the first thing. The second thing is the cycle, the technology cycle is so quick now. We're talking of like months that I think forecasts and predictions about what's going to work, what's not going to work are very tricky, if not impossible, right now. And so just think of like obviously we're talking like the slide deck CMO, but like if you're like going through your board and giving them presentation of like your worldview for next year, good luck for that worldview to be like, close to reality. Like, for example, like, can you tell me how you should build your website next year? Like, which CMS, which approach should you take? Like, it's impossible.
Mm,
It's absolutely impossible. There's no telling, if something like Vercel V0 or Lovable will be the golden standard like 6 months from now, or something else, right? And so how should you account for that? Almost
totally. And
impossible.
then you have other market dynamics of like Cloudflare, who are going to put up barriers to AI search engines, like what we went through there, like different browser experiences, just like the traffic chart we saw. Like who would have thought maybe like 12, 24 months ago that like GPT would be at the point of like almost crossing Google in terms of search traffic in the next like 6 to 12 months. Like that's wild.
With the big question mark of how they're going to monetize. Like the how is OpenAI going to monetize is probably the biggest unknown in the industry.
Hmm.
And the answer to that will have like tremendous impact on say the careers of CMOs.
Totally. And like one thing you call out there is like there's uncertainty that exists today, and like the speed mismatch is like it's brutal. And I think from the best practitioners I've seen, or like the best teams I've personally worked with or that are in my network, are prioritizing like action right now. It's like, can we get like shots on deck? Can we experiment? Can we see like what's working, where our audience lives, where our audience like migrating from? It's almost like going back to basics of like great audience research. Like as we look at the 2 points here of like the playbook, or like the old school playbook is expiring and channels are almost like drifting away that we would have relied on in the past, G. Like what makes what are the top considerations for like a leader or a manager today as they think about the next like 6 months, and like how can they prioritize what they drive a lot of like action around?
Yeah, I think the problem is that most people have gotten into a CMO or VP role with they've built pattern matching and experience of like what works given what situations, and they kind of have those playbooks that they like to reapply, right? I think that thought process is fundamentally broken right now. Because you go into this new job and you say, great, we're going to do like SEO and ads and outbound. Tough luck. Like none of those three channels, are likely to work out in the future. But if those were like 2/3 of your demand gen, you need to reinvent yourself, all right? On what channels? And so that's the problem. Like, a lot of the marketers are facing a situation where they don't know what to do, and they don't know what's going to work. All
Hmm.
right. And so they are, I think there's a feeling of helplessness, right? And I think they're not doing what they should do, which is aggressively take the lead, all right, and put some investments towards like again that moving target. Like let's just like take that example. We said like maybe GPT or LLMs in general, with perplexity and whatnot, it's going to be like 20% at the end of the year. Sure, why not? Okay. Well, that means that you should be investing 20% now. So we said, right? Who's investing 20% of their capital and their headcount towards LLM search, LLM presence, right? Who is actually doing that? Who is building like, secret hidden pages for LLMs only? Who is like monitoring their LLM presence on a tool like, on an LLM like presence tool? Um, Very few of the people I talk to, like exceedingly few. And so that's the problem. They're not building the skills and not building, let's say, the pattern matching for the future.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We got a comment in from Jan there who very cleverly has stated it's like the early days of the internet. Everything is changing, but like this time it's a lot faster.
Hmm.
Like that,
Absolutely. But it's the same thing. Like
yeah.
it's different. But like I mean, I come from like, almost the past century because I did internet websites in like the prior century, which is crazy, right? But hear me out here. Like if you think about it, like the tactics that I see working right now on some of the companies to like improve your presence on GPT, for example, very similar to what we used to be like 15 years ago, 10 years ago on Google. We were just like keyword stuffing some pages, and we were like
Mm,
creating like a number of like crappy pages to like increase our presence down the SERPs or things like that, and like building some ref links and whatnot. Like because OpenAI is not optimizing against those patterns, sometimes dark patterns from marketers, right? They're optimizing for the core user experience right now, right? There's an arbitrage. A lot of those tactics, similar tactics, are working and will work until like they arbitrage against it, right? Because too
mm,
many people do it. It's
yeah.
exactly the same tactics, but you do need to get moving there. Absolutely.
Yeah, and to get moving, I think this is like a good segue into like this slide. Like what you mentioned, if it was 15 years ago and the start of Google and 10 blue links, like this notion of like the SEO person or like a content team specialized in SEO came to fruition. We then had like content engineers who were able to, or growth engineers who were able to like again find gaps, exploit them across different channels, and then scale up new channels. And when we think about like headcount was one thing you mentioned earlier that was previously a core tenet of a CMO's like role. Could they source and recruit the best people? Could they scale them up? That is like being almost rewritten at the moment. If you were at one of the companies that you currently advise, we'll say like Series B, C, how would you start to think about like the skill sets that are emerging as being very important to like start to invest in? How would you look to like
Yeah.
reshape the
So
team?
I mean, I'm biased on it because like I've always been like this kind of hybrid, like builder, technical marketer, whatever you want to call it. Like growth was the fancy word, but like yeah, we put the screenshots here of like Jason and Josh because it's amazing. Jason from SaaS Jason initially is a sales guy. All right. And obviously he's much more now. Like, he has the huge conference for like a decade. He's been like, a renowned VC, but like he's not a engineer builder. And for the past 5 days, he's been like vibe coding. All right. And there's a couple of reasons for that. As a VC, he needs to like, understand the market, sure, but like it is showing us a shift in a lot of those people understanding, that dynamic and forcing themselves to like learn, challenge themselves to understand how they should rebuild teams. I think the best people are forcing themselves through that diet of sorts. All right. It's uncomfortable for sure, but you have to do it. And so every time now that somebody comes to me like, hey, like how should I do this thing? Like the answer should be like, can you try doing it yourself? Can
Mm,
you should try. All right, you should try, figure out the tools, figure so that because otherwise the risk is you take the old approach. The risk is that your team takes the safe old approach, right? And if I look back, for example, let's look back at Ramp, a company that I profoundly love, all right? Um, and I have a lot of respect for. Like Kareem, the CTO, co-founder, manages the marketing and growth team, which tells you something, right? The team is optimizing for builders, is hiring mostly engineers in marketing, GTM engineers, sure, but like still. And they are optimizing for workflows. They are optimizing for people who can build. That's part of the core the job interviews, right? And the take homes can only be solved by people who will use AI workflows for every job function, all right? And so that is how you optimize for that slope. You start shifting who you hire, you start shifting how you build your team, and it needs to come from the top down, which means your CEO, your founders need to be not just on board, they need to be pushing that.
mm.
My friend Wade at Zapier, for example, also like he's all over LinkedIn these days and like showing all those workflows. All right, a ton of respect for what he's posting on LinkedIn too. All right, and you can see some of those CEOs like they're grasping at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And like what today is maybe like the take-home exercise for like a new hire. Like that's where Clay call it like GTM alpha, but that is where
Mm.
like your alpha turns into a growth channel or like a massive part of your culture in like years to come. And I think from a lot of what Ramp put out, like even on their growth team, it's like rapid experimentation. It's like, yeah, can we find the right people? Can we test it? Can we like get it in production and then like actually realize the results from it?
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
This one then obviously there's a lot of text on it, just like some key slides to kind of set us up for the next few ones that we'll run through. But interestingly, as we like prepped for this, average tenure for a CMO, I think it's remaining kind of consistent, but it's at 18 months, which is way lower than anyone else in the C-suite. But what was interesting is like the actual number of CMOs is in decline. And I
Yeah.
think that goes back to your core point, G, at the start of there's a lot more questions. The typical playbook is maybe shifting under the CMO quicker than anyone.
When you
Um,
think of an equation where you cut something in half, there's only two ways to answer the question. You have same number of CMOs and they work half, or you have half the number of CMOs.
yeah,
That's how the equation works. And you got
yeah,
two sides of the equation you need to handle. And like I think that you're going to see a bit of both. You're going to see less CMOs,
mm,
and they definitely have like a bit less of the traditional scope.
yeah. I think like the positive outlook as well on it is that like for the folks that get it right, they're probably going to lead their orgs in terms of like AI adoption, right? Culture for hiring. Like there's many pros for which the people who lean into it in the right way can actually like stand out. And then just before we get into like again what we call like the AI proof channels, again just setting the stage, like 45% of Google searches today have that AI overview. So like you mentioned, G, with like the new web browser experience, a lot of the content teams might go and create today is not actually going to get the click for the user to go read the full article and action on the CTA. Like you need to be present a layer before that within like the agent. And then we're also going back to just like this social proof, the trust graph. Like you're going to lean on people who you trust to give you recommendations for your team, for technology, for your stack. So that leads nicely into I think what you've started to call like the AI proof channels. Do you want to kind of walk us through your take on these two and why they stand out and will stand out kind of as good bets as we go forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, there's two approaches here that are very valid and that everyone should play on both sides. One, which is like what we've been talking up to here, which is like a pure in GPT search, a pure in LLM search. Think for like the browser-less future, or the web-less future, right? Where every interaction goes through like ATP, and that's the right side of this slide here, right? And like optimized for agents. So like yes, a good chunk of who we are marketing to are agents, AI agents. Okay, but then there's the other half, right? And that's the left part. I think there's enough channels that are AI resistant or AI proof. All right. And there's a couple of like good opportunities there. For example, everything that is like webinars, in-person events, dinners, referrals, all right. All of that, is pretty much AI proof. Uh, all of the social graph, all right, is also AI proof, right? So when I think, for example, I saw that there was like a Ty who asked a question. I've known Ty and I've interacted with him personally. I know Owen here, right? Interacting with you personally. So those are individuals I know. They're part of my social graph in a very Facebook, view of the world, right? It's part of my graph. And so if I interact with them through an email or like they comment on a LinkedIn post of mine, right? I will have conviction humans, they actually did it. All right. And so this will create reciprocity, let's say, in my little reptilian brain of mine. Right. And so that is important because I think that's going to stay true for a very, very long while. All the people that I know that are in my craft that interact with me or that I interact with them, I think that is extremely valuable, and that I don't think that can be displaced by AI. I don't see like Owen, automating his interactions with me because that is almost a dismissive, insulting. All right, because like humans respect humans. And I think you're going to see those like that two lane like two-speed world of things where like if I respect this relationship, I will spend some of my human time, very valuable, to like, continue that relationship. If I don't know this relationship, I don't know this person, I will automate use an agent like GPT my way through like the and we're going to see a lot of that, right? And so people will then can have this path, this upgrade path, where now that I've met you, now I will spend some human time with you, all right? But yeah,
Mm.
I think that's absolutely what we're going to see. And as marketers, we should think, how do we scale that? How do we automate that? So, for example, like, I was, talking to Owen this morning, who is right now automating the collection of all uh, LinkedIn engagements of your audience on somebody on any content, right? Your ICP. You could totally go identify all of your potential buyers on LinkedIn, if you're in B2B, obviously, right? And scrape all of the engagement and figure out who posted the content they engage on, right? With what is the topics? What are the topics there, right? And can you create like this little mind map of sorts, all right? That would be extremely valuable. And I know almost of no one doing that.
There's an opportunity for someone. Next
Always,
YC batch. You've inspired them,
always
G.
opportunities. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, one thing that comes to mind as I go into this one, which is like preparing for a post-web experience or like optimizing for like appearing in like ChatGPT, is almost the return of the importance of brand. So I think maybe it could have been almost 12 months ago, but we saw like HubSpot maybe get like almost called out on
Destroyed.
LinkedIn, yeah, for like their traffic going away. And then you have like Kip and Kieran who come out and are like, look, we saw this coming like 24 months ago, and we like reinvested in brand. We know how important like topical authority will be. They scale up channels on top of that in terms of different forms of content. And then obviously they have like podcasts and like influencers. So almost within this where the agent comes into play, G, where's like the hybrid part of like where trust meets this new world of like AI search, where like brand is still like very prominent.
No, yeah, I do think that if you go back to trust, like what people will continue to react to, all right, in a world where they don't read the web content, which is why HubSpot, G2, and a couple others are getting destroyed, all right, the big web presences there, all right. Interestingly, we're not seeing Reddit being destroyed, so that also does tell us something, all right, and because I assume consumers, people, humans believe Reddit is still majority, principally a place where there's humans. Well, that's true or not, that's what they believe. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and so where you can see like, HubSpot investing is indeed on media formats where there's a high trust component, podcasts and videos, and a high human trust component. You are convinced this is from human. Now that's interesting. Like, all that's interesting. You think about it, when we were doing like automated outbound like 5 years ago, and like those text-based emails where it's like, "Hey, I'm the founder," whatnot. Like maybe 10 years ago, time flies. All right, just to create this perception of humanness that lasted like maybe a year, 12 months, whatnot. And no, then it was arbitrage, it disappeared, it created. And so we made better and better emails. All right. It's kind of like this race to the bottom of trying to impersonate a human being, scale it, all right, in a decideful way, sure. But that's because there's an arbitrage of like there's a small percentage of the population that believes it's from a human. Thus, they will react. Okay, they will respond, and that's just enough for the margin to be profitable and scale that motion. Okay, and so what brands are doing is that they're running faster and faster towards things that are harder to automate. And what the YC batch and startups are doing is like, ooh, this is working. So like, let's build like video avatars that can like do podcasts. You are absolutely 100% seeing that. All right. And they're getting better and better. And the voice agents are getting better and better. All right. And so what's going on, I do think just see those two curves, right? Where like people are doing things that are harder and harder to automate, and like some of the builders are just trying to replicate that in a scalable way. And so I think you got to avoid being in the middle of that.
Hmm.
I think you need to play things that are like very hard to automate, like we discussed, right? And I think for sure right now, if you have like, Skip and Kieran on a podcast, I think it's very hard to automate that, right? Um, or you have to be on the other side of that, or play on both sides, which is like, I think there's a market for AI avatars. I think it's a market for like voice agents. Absolutely. And so when I work with like companies, for example, we're like thinking of like this VIP path. When is it profitable to like have human certainty mid-market and up because the contract size, because the complexity, because the knowledge, because the value of the AE is sufficient, right? Versus when is it not profitable anymore, all right? And so if you're a PLG company, for example, all right, and you have like high volume, low conversion rates, well, you're already forced into like using AI platforms, AI tools, AI agents everywhere, right? And so how can you make that experience better? Right. And I think it's a question of like the value, how valuable the experience is versus how valuable is the customer to you and finding like the margin in between here. The story hasn't changed. This is the approach and the tooling has, but it's always a little margin that we see in between those two things.
I love it. Yeah, definitely approach, tooling, and like what we say here, like the web experience has totally changed. Like I picked out Guillermo from
Vercel.
Vercel, who, if I
Yeah.
go back on, like if you look, this is like 6 months ago prior to April. So like end of 2024, LLM traffic was 1% of their total signups. You go back to like February, it was then 5%. And then 2 months ago, it was 10%. Like that is like an exponential curve. And when we talk about like the speed mismatch being brutal, like if you're thinking of a company the size of Vercel who are trying to like optimize for this, I think you mentioned like Josh Grant earlier at Webflow, who's doing a lot of this as well. Like the agent is well and truly now like in the middle of like the prospective buyer and the brand, be it like e-commerce or an actual like SaaS company. Like we summarize here like some of what we know so far, which is like users are not clicking the 10 blue links as much. Even the 10 blue links aren't even present as much. It's more videos, like you said, podcasts, everything else that consumes the real estate. The undifferentiated content is now just like invalid. So where previously you could ask for a definition, I might lead you to a Salesforce or a Sana page. Right now, the LLM just knows that. And it's going to give you probably a better response than they could. And where I'd be interested in your take, G, is like today there's very much an overlap between the attributes that matter for like SEO and AEO, but it's diverging
Yes.
so quickly. And like,
Yes.
what are some of the, again, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't say this is where it's
Uh-huh.
going to be in 12 months, but like, what are some of the flavors of where you see just like the true agent only experience be in maybe the next 12 months? What are options people should like consider?
Yeah. So a few things. One on what Guillaume is saying. I think it's interesting. Yes, I'm seeing across all the companies I advise that the overall traffic from Google is dropping, traffic from LM is increasing. Overall traffic is lower, right? But conversions are stable. So we have less crappy traffic. Also, the traffic coming from LLM is more valuable than the traffic from Google on a per user basis. Okay, so that's so that forces us to like be very thoughtful about that traffic. What's interesting, I think, if you just think about what we said of this browserless future, um, people are still picking in B2B. For example, let's talk about Ramp. The asking for the top 10, 5 financial platforms and credit cards for their business, right? And they're picking one of those 5 based on like what the LLM recommends. Okay, and then they click and they come at the top of my funnel. All right, which is why we see the traffic from LLM. I don't know that that will be the case forever. I don't know that people will need to click and come to my, product webpage. We're thinking of like when you think about all of this MCP work with Anthropic, right? I think there's a number of businesses, especially API businesses, data businesses. If you're ZoomInfo, for example, do you need people to come and sign up for ZoomInfo to get the value of ZoomInfo? Not necessarily. Because hey, I want like 500 companies with those attributes. And it's like, oh, great. Like, can I connect to ZoomInfo and charge you like $9? Okay, cool. But there you go. Here's a CSV.
Hmm.
Done. All right. Very easy. Because the connectors exist today.
Hmm.
There's like MCP connectors today to do that. Okay.
Yeah,
The billing does not, but all the rest. You're just missing the billing part. That's it. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely going to happen. The second thing, optimizing for this LLM search presence, there's arbitrage opportunities. We discussed at the very beginning. It's the same but different. So for example, for the past 15 years, we've been optimizing for like, first three SERP results, right? Because the distribution of like traffic goes to the first three, and we know very well, the 34% on like the first link and whatnot. The There's an arbitrage right now where if you want to appear in GPT, namely, because that's number one, obviously, it seems that GPT has a weight of importance of the links of the SERPs, for what it's worth, that is heavily like influenced by Bing, because that's where they pull the results from. And so like where nobody cared about Bing, right, really, and nobody was optimizing, that was very easy. Now you say, hey, like actually, I should optimize for Bing first. Second, well, the presence on, let's say, links SERPs from like 8 to 12 used to be valueless because like there's less than 1% traffic going there. Now we're seeing that like GPT has like almost equal weight distribution on its importance factors of like links 1 to 3 and like down to 12. 1 to 3 is very hard, even on Bing, right? Sometimes, depending on the keyword. 8 to 12 is very easy. Like I can get you on like the 10th position, like pretty much any keyword, right? But if that helps you get on GPT, all right, like wait, a 10th position on Bing, that's nothing. That's like what? That's like 2 pages, 3 pages, like it's like half a day of work, right? And so that's an arbitrage.
Mm.
That's absolutely an arbitrage. And so that are some of the things, you really should think like fundamentally, how does it work? And you should test, and you should have rapid velocity and find those arbitrage opportunities, right? Same as, well, what is the content I want to expose to an LLM, right? And is it the same thing that I want to expose to a human? Not necessarily, all right? And in the past, we were penalized for having different websites for Google than for the humans, right? There's no, for now, I have not heard of any similar thing for LM. So a lot of people are exposing different content, entire websites, directories, indexes for GPT than for the human viewer, right?
Mm.
And it seems to be working.
Interesting. You speak about like arbitrage there. A lot of it was, and I think myself, like these LLMs, they give you access to almost the average of average marketers in the aggregate. So having that like alpha, like developing your own like arbitrage is like key. And something I saw on one of your like SaaStr slides, G, was this workflow that like attention built on top of AirOps, where really they're putting their own like unique insights into their content, which is going to help them stand out. If they were to just do this on top of Claude or GPT, obviously it's not coming with the frustrations of their customers. It's not coming with any of their own internal metrics. Um, maybe just walk us through overall like how this is constructed, and maybe like what is that like attention team seeing in terms of like impact from it?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, going back to this, the value of the human in the process and the humanness, and whether you want to be decideful or not, but clearly we still need humans in a lot of like AI workflows for that, finishing touch, or for that polishing. All right. And that is why you're seeing, a lot of those AI BDR platforms struggling still today. I'm not seeing them like succeed in any of the companies I work at, right? And it's the same for like pure AI content with no workflow with a human review, all right? And it's why you see like the companies, the copy AIs, the Jaspers of like a couple of years ago, like still struggling with this full like AI approach. Um, we need a human variance at the beginning or the end of the workflow, all right? And there's multiple ways to do it. What attention has done is their approach is like, hey, we're having human-to-human conversations in our sales calls. All right, those are already happening. There's a lot of variance, there's a lot of uniqueness in those conversations that we can leverage. We can, obviously, everybody's like, capturing those, and attention is a fantastic way to do that, right? Capture all of the entire transcript, but then like basically put it in a vector database of sorts, all right? And like understand like, what are the themes in relationship to who this prospect, who this customer is, what are the pain points based in relationship to the industry, to the sector, to the products, the ACV, the type of customers they have. And then you can use that to create either trade content, either for like, I'd say SEO purposes or for like outbound purposes. All right. And I'm seeing absolutely both being used very successfully. For example, my friends at Gorgias, they did that in different but quite similar way. And the response rates on outbound went from like 2% to 6%. All right. So they tripled the response rate by being able to like inject the part of the call transcript at the beginning of the outbound prompt, inside the prompt, to create that huge variance. So, for example, going back to our jewelry example, if there's a Shopify store that sells a specific kind of jewelry in Indiana or whatnot to a specific price point, a specific theme, right? And they have their specific pain points on, returns or whatnot, customer feedback or like market trends. That data is something my team, my marketing team cannot come up with. It's too specific. Inject that at the beginning of the prompt, and you find another prospect, or you want to write a piece of content for that, maybe the couple hundred of stores that have the same things, right? You can create an infinite variation there. That is very good. This is
Mm-hmm.
very spot on, right? And so that scales very well. That is very, very valuable. So here, what's interesting, I think, is that um, whether there is a AI workflow or not doesn't matter to the readership because it's just too close, too specific to who they are and what they do for them to ignore it.
Yeah, I love that. It goes back to the basics of good marketing of like reiterate what the person is telling you. Like, what are their frustrations? How can you answer them? How can you like deliver them a solution that like answers what they need to tackle in their daily work. With a couple of minutes left, if people have questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A section, and we'll get to them after this next slide or two. But yeah, a lot of what you mentioned, G, so far has been like experimentation. It's prioritized speed over perfection. Just like you said earlier, when we saw like GPT and Google switch or about to switch in terms of like where traffic is coming from or where users are searching, like if you're trying to lay bets today, you're trying to forecast or get ahead of where something's going to be in like 3 months or 6 months. So like maybe if it's going to be 20% of total traffic, you should be starting to like allocate 20% of your resources there right now. So that's like testing is unlocking the outcomes. And then from us talking to customers, and I'd be interested in your take as well, like the metrics are very nascent. It's not as if we have on the like organic search side a ton of mature metrics for this like emerging market with web experiences changing, like new channels emerging. I think a lot of people are thinking within the context of how do I stack up versus my competitors? Like, what's my like brand visibility? Am I getting cited more or less than them? What are they getting cited on that I'm not? Like, those are opportunities. Yeah. How are like leading companies today thinking about like looking at the North Star metrics or the input metrics to those to help them orient themselves towards like bias to action?
Yeah, I mean, I was reviewing like the ramp marketing slides for the quarter, and like GPT presence was slide number 2. So, like, for the first time, you just see it there, and you can see this little chart, and they have it, and they have the example of like the queries and like how many queries are
Mm.
testing and the traffic. So, like, yeah, that is one of the core metrics for the VP growth there, right? Yeah, I think that's we can move on so we can have some Q&A, but I
Yeah.
think you should definitely have that in your slides, if you still have slides.
I love it. So we're at the takeaways here. Do you want to maybe voice over these, G? And then the prompt I might leave you with is if you're a CMO that hasn't changed your tune and it's January of 2026, which of these will have cost you the most at that point in time?
I think any of those is sufficient to have cost you your job. So that's if you haven't changed your tune, uh, damn. But okay. I
Or
think headcount is probably number one. I think um headcount always takes a while to move. And so when I think of like what do I need to move first? Headcount plans. because there's a huge lag time. All
Mm.
right. So I need to change my hiring tactic. We talked about it. All right. Reshuffle, blow up my team, and account for a world where I've got people managing workflows. It's probably number one. Um, I would put AEO second because I think that is there's a bit of more of an immediate feedback loop. All right. A bit faster. I think it's easier to test. All right. I would say the budget last, which is interesting, but because we just don't know, we
Mhm.
don't know where to invest, right? And so I think it's just hard to prioritize what we don't know. So yeah, I would put headcount, AEO, and budget in that order. But to be honest, yeah, if you haven't worked on all three, you're out. And I'm going into some like if you haven't done those three and you see me coming as an advisor, I'm probably going to make a recommendation that you should be out. And I'm doing
Mhm.
that in some of the companies, to be honest, because that is the right call. That
Mm.
absolutely is the right call.
That's fair. While other questions are trickling in here, I had a few that got collected in advance. If you like some people that couldn't join, but one of them, G, and it's like relevant to what you were saying here with respect to prioritizing headcount and who you need to have in seat, what like bets you take. I know Ramp and you were there are big
Mm.
champions of it. How do you start to balance like the short-term bets that might have really long-term gains versus the long-term bets you can be more sure of? Like if you're a growth leader or someone who's trying to like maybe you're late for Q3 planning, but planning for like Q4 and beyond, like how in your head are you making the decisions between like where to allocate versus like high potential versus like trustworthy?
Yeah. I like to think of most marketing tactics as angel investment. And large bets need to be broken down into smaller bets.
Mm,
And I like to take risk. If I don't take risk, I'm doing the same stuff that all my competitors can do. How am I going to be better?
mm,
Right. So I tend to, um, I almost like the sprint approach because I don't know what's going to work. I just like spray and pray at very high speed. If you look, for example, in angel investment, you look at the returns that our friends at AngelList are posting, you will see that there's almost no signal. There is no one has a much higher win rate. Like the top VCs early stage have a win rate of like 12, 13%, and the bad ones of like 8%. That's not huge difference, right? You would think the best VCs have like 30%. No, no, no. And in marketing, it's the same thing. All right. But the difference is that if you want to capture the high alpha, you want to capture the wins. If you want to have the tactic that puts you on like GPT scoreboard number one 6 months from
mm,
now, you need to test everything. There's no playbook today that will get you there, sure proof. Absolutely not. And so you need to test. You need to test, you need to have like, you need to be, and that's the hard part when you're hiring. You need to have this dual like mindset, very creative, extremely like almost borderline crazy creative, and rigorously scientific when it comes to measurement. And that's very difficult. Those like this is almost like two different like profiles, but that's who you need to be. Crazy creative, rigorously scientific.
mhm. And we might get time for one last question here. When it comes to like scientific, I think in terms of channels, you can't really look far beyond in the last few years, more so than like paid ads and paid search. So there's a question from Adina of like how important are paid Google ads in this new environment? And then maybe like how should organic and paid teams look to work together?
I think eventually, like, here's the future that I could paint in a second. Like, either Google gets their stuff together to speak politely here on LLM, and which honestly very likely that they will because like it's a huge machine and like they're not gonna like let GPT OpenAI steal their lunch. All right, and so if that's the case, then we're just gonna have a better version of Google, and they will know how to monetize because paid ads is 95% of like Google's revenue or close to, right?
Mm,
So like this is like a survival case for Google. Okay. In which case, same, same business, like life goes back to normal for us. Or B, they don't get their stuff together Okay. And OpenAI does steal their lunch, absolutely. In which case, we then like paid ads as we know them are gone entirely, right? And we just don't know how Sam and OpenAI are going to monetize. We don't know, but then we'll have to be on the lookout for that. It is probably going to be very different if Plan B happens.
Yeah, we're yet to see. I guess time will tell. Everyone's got to make money, so they'll have to monetize it somehow. Just to close us off and to make sure we say thanks to G in good time, just quickly brief on like AirOps. A lot of what G spoke about was taking action, like times are changing. That's where AirOps can help fit in. So like we help a lot of the companies listed there from like Descript. They're super keen on growing their brand visibility in AI search, GPT. Someone like Josh Grant at Webflow that we mentioned, they're doing a ton of experimentation on their own, building workflows like Attention's one for their like 5xing their content refresh. Again, putting previous content they put time, sweat, and effort into making that more valuable in today's age. And then not forgetting about like the e-commerce side and ability to convert on customers. Lightspeed are doing an amazing job there, and like huge shout out to that team. And then last but not least, G, if people want to hear more from you, if they would love to work with Hypergrowth, how might people learn more from you on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis or get in touch?
Yeah, we have a great website that's being rebuilt and lovable at hypergrowthpartners.com. Do reach out to us there, and we tend to advise scale ups, late Series A, Series Bs, and later to go faster. So yeah, do reach out to us if you're a co-founder, a marketing leader. Would love to be in touch.
Amazing. G, you're a technologist, an operator, a builder. You're also super efficient with time. We're finishing bang on the top of the hour. So really want to thank you for taking the time today to walk us through everything that you did and share your insights. And yeah, thanks so much. And thanks everyone else for joining us. We'll get a recap out later on today, but if there's any questions, our information is there too. But thanks so much. And we'll speak to
Thank you,
everyone
Owen.
soon.
Lovely. Thank you,
No
Owen. Have a
worries.
good one.
See you later, folks. Bye bye. Thanks, G.